About 6 years ago, I got my period. And 2 years after that, I learned about period poverty. Now, at the time, I was only in middle school, and after coming out of quarantine being all isolated, I'd barely felt comfortable talking about my period, let alone about some sort of inequality associated with it. However, as I talked and learned more from my peers, I realized that period poverty is not a thing of the past, nor is it something that we've overcome as a society. Additionally, the stigma towards menstruation is evident. 58% of menstruators have felt embarrassed just because they were on their period. Here's a picture of me in middle school, when my friend and I decided that having to walk all the way to the nurse's office in the middle of the school day to ask for the most embarrassing item ever, a pad, was not something that any of us should have to do. The school had these products, why not just make them more accessible? But when we turned to our own peers for help, we were quickly hit with backlash. Our posters that we had hung up with so much pride were quickly laughed at and torn down. Despite the struggles that we faced, we still managed to find a supportive group of individuals. We managed to hold successful product drives and even create educational resources for those within our school and even in the greater district. When we asked our teachers and faculty that had supported us through this journey, why would we ever get laughed at, they had told us it was just a part of middle school. Despite the struggles that we faced, this experience allowed me to realize that we had education classes in our school, but we were not immune to the stigma that surrounds menstruation. But we still had a community that supported us. This is not true for every single person, though. I think of the representation and community that I have surrounding me as a privilege, and I often think back to my grandmother, who was one of the kindest and most supportive people that I knew. However, I remember her telling me that she quit school in 10th grade and ended up giving for her love of sports, and when I asked her why she would ever do such a silly thing, she said her education was just not worth it. Or at least, that's what she had been told. 122 million girls are out of school, and of that, 70% are out of secondary school, meaning that they'll never reach some sort of level of higher education or even potentially a career. We as a community are holding back a population of individuals who have so much potential in their lives, yet are held back from the key to success, education. I remember during a visit to India in 4th grade, seeing a girl around my age running on the street to get food when she should have been in school studying, like other kids I would have suspected. In that moment, I realized how lucky I was to have an education and that this was an opportunity that is readily available for every single individual. Many of these girls who are forced out of school are often pushed into child labor or even marriage. 650 million living women were forced into marriage under the age of 18. And each year, 12 million girls are forced into child marriage. As a 17-year-old, I could never imagine being forced into a life of domestic chores instead of a life of independence. Additionally, it is these young girls that get married off younger that will often become pregnant at younger ages, thus leading to things such as malnourishment for both themselves and their children. 1.5 billion women lack necessary healthcare screenings, meaning that they'll fall into common infections and diseases, which could just be avoided with proper education. One of the most common and least talked about of these issues is period poverty. Period poverty affects 500 million menstruators. It is defined as the lack of access to menstrual education as well as the lack of access to menstrual products. Additionally, menstruators who fall into this category of period poverty have to choose between basic necessities like food or pads and tampons. They will often instead use unhygienic practices like toilet papers or newspapers as substitutes, which is unfair and doesn't allow them to succeed as equally as other people, often holding these menstruators back from activities like clubs and sports. In unpredicted circumstances, we aren't expected to carry around toilet paper. Why pads? In the United States, 14% of college students fall into this category of period poverty, once again choosing between textbooks or menstrual products. It's an unfair stress that certain students have to carry. In the United States itself, 20 states tax menstrual products like they are some sort of luxury. This tax is also known as the pink tax, in which women's products of same or equal usage of those of men's products are priced much higher. Menstrual products specifically should not be taxed additionally because they are a necessity. Additionally, the lack of access to education on menstruation and women's healthcare can force women and young girls away from asking for help on their own bodies and healthcare. In certain communities around the globe, menstruation is seen as so impure or dirty that women are forced out of their own homes and even not allowed into certain public spaces during that time. So all of this data and global concern brought me to wonder if it was truly only my middle school that had this much of stigma. Well, as we all know now, it's not. The stigma surrounding menstruation affects millions of menstruators around the globe. Last summer, I had the opportunity to volunteer for the Massachusetts chapter for the National Organization for Women. We discussed the importance of women's health care and general health care, and especially laws surrounding those topics. We talked about the I Am Bill, a bill drafted and proposed in Massachusetts that would provide free menstrual products in public schools, homeless shelters, and prisons. Though the bill was not passed, this experience allowed me to recognize that even within Massachusetts, a state with so much of healthcare resources, we still don't have adequate and equal access for menstrual products. Now, my friends and I still strive to empower students to use their voices. I'm currently working on an interscholastic coalition called Free Period Talk. We connect with other students in the greater Boston area and empower us, the students and the leaders of the next generation, to use their voices and to bridge the inequality gap in things like healthcare and education. Students can start through easy and simple steps like tutoring at other schools, volunteering at homeless shelters, and even hosting product drives for their local communities. In fact, each and every single one of you can go home and read an article about period poverty from UN Women or the National Institute of Health and recognize that women's health care is not just a women's issue, but is an everybody issue. When we talk about these kind of issues that have so often been silenced, then we can decrease the stigma surrounding them and provide a future that would be more equitable. The road to equality is also not impossible. Countries like Scotland, New Zealand, and Kenya all offer free menstrual products in their public schools. We can do it too. In the future generations, we shouldn't be held back from divided socioeconomic status, especially when it comes to things like education and healthcare, and especially for young girls who deserve the chance to thrive in every single setting that they're put in. In doing so, we can have a more successful future and a prosperous one for every single individual. Thank you.